Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right.
I promise I'm a working professional.
No, I believe you. I
People
was
even
just
give me
saying,
money.
I hope you can hear me okay on these
Uh,
earbuds.
I can keep talking for a second, please.
Yeah. So I don't have a fancy microphone yet, like you. I know.
No
But
worries.
hopefully these earbuds will work. Testing, testing.
What kind
Uh,
are they? Are they
they're,
Jabras?
yeah, they are. They
They
are.
look like Jab. Yeah. So I use these. I got a little shelf under my desk. Whoopsh. I use these, and they're the Elite 75 Ts. So they're a
Okay.
few. They're discontinued now, but they're the silver gray top ones,
Yeah.
right?
So
Dude, I've
I
been
have,
using these for years. One failed. I got a new pair, their fanciest pair. Spent like a couple days talking to their customer support people, and they're like, "Yeah, this one." And I'm like, "But all the speakers inside the earbuds on the newer models are half the size. So it can only push out literally half the volume. But their sound quality's supposedly better. But with these, I got the new ones and I tried them. Dude, I've had so many bombs and gunfire around my head. You know what I
hmm
mean? And over the years, it's not that I'm hard of hearing, but I like my music loud.
hmm
And I like it hitting hard. And I got the new ones. I'm like, I can't do it. I can hear my feet hitting the ground when I run in these things, right? Noise cancellation. Anyway, long and short of it, I went on eBay, found a right ear for my old set, and they work beautiful. And that's my story. But I love
Nice.
Jabras.
Yeah, me too. I'm on my third pair. My first one I had for a long time, and then the headphones still worked great, but the case stopped. Some wiring in the case didn't work, so you could charge the case, but they couldn't transfer juice from the case to the earbuds anymore.
Dang.
And I had a hard time finding a replacement part. Anyway, so I just got another set, and then I'm pretty sure my son, who's almost two, ran off with the second. He went through a he went through a phase where he liked to throw stuff into the trash while we weren't looking. And so if you don't, I mean, so then it's just gone, right? If you don't care, if you don't realize you're missing it until trash day. And I'm pretty sure that's where the headphones went.
Wow.
And one of the best stories from that is we have one of those adjustable beds, and there's a little remote. It's about the size of a TV remote.
We have one too.
So he
I get it.
pushes the buttons, puts it into a taco, and then we're all laughing about it because we think it's so cute and stuff. He's like one at this time. So then we go about our day, and then at night we go to flatten the bed, and I'm like, "Hey, where's the remote?" And my wife's like, "I don't know. Where is it?" So we spend 45 minutes like looking everywhere in the house. We're tired. We want to go to bed. Can't find it. Finally, I dump out the recycling bin, and he had put it in the bottom of the recycling bin. And so we spent almost an hour trying to get our bed flat at like whatever 11 p.m. or something.
Man. Yeah. What is yours? What what? Well, I guess they make all different frames, right? People that do these the power beds and all that.
Yeah, we bought ours right when we got married, so it's been a while, and I don't remember what brand or anything it is. I think it was like Mattress Firm's store generic brand or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
It's
Right
heavy.
on.
It's super heavy, and it's hard to move because it's unwieldy, right? Like it's big
Yeah.
and heavy, and so and
Do you
then
have?
when you try to pick it up, it like folds in on itself. So
Yeah. Do you have? Because there's no springs in them anymore,
no,
so there's no structure, right?
right?
With your bed foundation, is it two separate ones or one?
No, ours is just one, and it's a queen.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
a split king or anything.
Got it. We went big. We've gone big for a long time and realized if we're gonna be doing this thing till one of us dies together, then you know, we need some space.
Yeah, no, we we're building a house right now, back in San Antonio, and we will have a king size bed when we move in.
Nice.
So I get it.
Very cool. All right, you know what? I need to check something. Can you on our video feeds, can you see our names there?
Yes, on the bottom
They
left.
display on the bottom, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so what I want to do is undo that. It's easy to undo that in Zoom. And I've used Riverside probably a dozen times now, and I guess I've never really just right now it's catching my attention. because I don't want them there. It makes for a cleaner post-production show. Because then I can control it and I can put nice designs on there and
Yeah.
people's names in a non-generic script and things like that, which is also fine. It's not a big deal, and I'm not going to trip about it. But if I can't find it real quick,
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking around the screen and I'm with you. It's pretty easy on Zoom, but I'm
yeah.
not.
All right, so then no big deal. We're going, and displayed to other people in the studio. Okay, maybe it might even be an issue or an option on download when I download the files to
Hmm.
include or not. I don't know. Doesn't matter to me. We're okay. But since you got your name, let's be consistent, and I'll put mine in there as Kasix. Where I just had it, just saw it, totally just saw it. I see yours. There it goes. Boom. That's not how you spell it. All right, you
All
excited?
right. Yeah, man, I'm really pumped. Sorry we had to reschedule last week, but I'm looking forward to it.
No, I'm glad we did. I have less stress and more energy. I shouldn't even say I wasn't stressed. It was just that was what had to happen. My wife's gym opens on Monday,
Yeah.
and like it's time to crank for her. So a couple little odds and ends to finish up this weekend, and that's it. And to let you know, maybe I shouldn't let you know, we are streaming live across 3 other platforms.
Nice.
So, oh yeah, we're up and live, baby.
Perfect. You gotta love live theater.
Yep, why not, right?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. You know what I didn't do, and I apologize, and this has to do with the last couple weeks is my excuse, is I did not send you the link to my to your guest your spotlighted page that you'll have with
Okay.
this episode. So what I'm going to do is after this, I'll send you the link. It's an intake form. You include anything in there that you want me to include in the show and the page and anything get a hold of you, whatever you
Yeah.
got. It's your opportunity to share with the stage, right? Whatever you got to offer. And so professional picture in there, that'll be good for the thumbnail, all those types of things. But I'll send that when we're done. Normally that goes beforehand, and there's like a release in there that says I can do whatever I want with you and your voice, and you have no power to hurt me or come back and say I can't. And I own you. I own you. I saw some people talking about that in the Buzzsprout community. Somebody, there was a guest who had an issue with something that they were talking about. They didn't want a couple portions of what they were talking about in the published show. And with that, I'm like, the guy's like, what should I do? And the right answer was what several people mentioned was like, well, tell them they signed a release. So that's one. But if you're the type of person to work with people and you'll honor that, you just won't do the show. You'll delete the files and you'll re-record the show. And the person like that's pretty generous even,
Yeah.
you
No, it's a lot
know,
of time. It's a big investment,
it's a
right?
lot of time, man. It's a lot of time. The production takes 3 or 4 times as long as the show.
Mm-hmm.
So minimum. Anyway, all right, here we are. And what do you want me to do in terms of a bio for you?
Well, however you want to do it. You want to ask me some targeted questions to hear what you want to hear, or you just want to open it up for me? I can kind of
Well, your
start and you can
professional bio.
follow up.
What's some street cred bullet points? Where you been? What do you do? You're in BBG, right?
Yes. What? Yeah. I started working with BBG back in December of 2020. I've gone through or 2021. Anyway, I'm on a little pause right now
Okay.
because the traditional publisher picked up my book, and so my schedule kind of shifted. But I've worked with them for a year. May pick back up with them when release date comes back around. But yeah,
Okay.
I'm familiar with them. Worked with them. They're great people.
What bio did you use for your book, or do you
Yeah,
have one written yet?
I do. I do.
Okay.
So I've got a bio that kind of goes through, because of how I've come to where I am. It's a little bit different than some of the others because I'm still practicing law full time. I don't have any
Yeah.
intention of kind of dropping that. So my bio is a little different in the sense of I've got this my most impressive accomplishments, let's say, if I can say so humbly, are probably in my career, right? In terms of what people think of when they say like what have you done, right? And so I cover a little bit of that, and then I lay a little bit of the groundwork for what I'm doing with this book, where it comes from, and what my mission is with it.
Okay.
So
Do you have a website set up for this yet?
It's I have my last meeting with my website developer soon, and it'll be published. And I just got some photos for it, so I'm kind of sewing the last threads on that effort right now.
Bravo. Yep. Do you have what I can either we can just start rolling into questions, or I can read a little something. You know, do you have anything for me to read anywhere about you?
Yeah.
Okay. You can either send it to me, or yeah, you could just email it to me and I'll just read it.
Perfect. Okay, heading your way.
Okay.
That's my sort of long form bio. Hopefully it's not too long for what you're looking for, but that's the one I had handy right now to send you on quick notice.
Okay. Yeah, because I didn't send you the link. See?
No worries. No worries.
Okay. Do you have in a sentence well, the sentence might be your specialty being helping people choosing faith over fear and the power that comes with that, right?
Right. Yeah, that's my whole mission and what I'm setting out to do right now, and
How that
why
what that looks like in a practical daily walk.
right, why you're interested in talking to me, and why your audience is interested in hearing.
Yes. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read the first sentence and I'm going to read the last paragraph.
Sounds good.
And then on my own time, I can voice over. Maybe I should just read the whole thing so it's all consistent with the sound. Let me just read this whole thing. That way I have it and I don't have to be concerned about inconsistent sound when if I voice over later.
Okay.
Yeah, been there, learned. Okay. I'm not even going to make eye contact. I'm just going to read this thing through without stuttering, hopefully. Got big teeth, man. Collects a lot of saliva. I got to make sure it's all sucked back and swallowed. Everybody always laughs when I make big teeth jokes. I tell my kids, you got to embrace it, man. We all got stuff. All right. Welcome, revolutionaries. Today I'm introducing you to Kyle Zunker. He's a leading commercial attorney, former atheist, and the author of Amazing Courage, a book about the power to choose faith over fear. As a principal of one of Texas's largest construction-focused law firms, Kyle's represented national and international construction companies in numerous multi-million-dollar disputes. His work on these high stakes legal His work on these high stakes legal cases has resulted in 7 and 8 figure damage awards and his recognition in best lawyers, ones to watch in America in the field of construction law. His expertise is backed by his doctor of Whoa! Should have practiced that one before. I've never seen that in print. Jurisprudence. Is that right?
There you go.
All right.
Got it. You nailed it.
His expertise is backed by his Doctor of Jurisprudence, magna cum laude, from Southern Methodist University's Dedman School of Law, and his triple major Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy, English, and Spanish, also magna cum laude, from Texas Lutheran University. As a leader in his industry, he serves as the young lawyer's representative for the construction section of the State Bar of Texas and holds the basic course in Texas construction law. Kyle finds meaning in conquering ultra-distance endurance athletic events. In 2021, he completed the Leadville 100 trail run, shout out David Goggins, and a 100-mile foot race across the Rocky Mountains, and raised more than $12,500 for charity in the process. He followed that up in 2023 by running the Habanero 100, a 100-mile foot race in the dog days of Texas's legendary summer heat, with temperatures reaching 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Kyle passionately supports his local churches in New Orleans and San Antonio, and through financial giving and by serving on the advisory board, where his legal training and goal-oriented practical experience provide valuable insight. As a former atheist, Kyle struggled with fear, anxiety, and panic attacks. His life changed when he chose faith and learned to fight fear's lies with God's truth. When his father was diagnosed with esophageal cancer a few years later, Kyle put the lessons he learned into practice by writing letters of encouragement to his father throughout his treatment. He now seeks to help you overcome your fears through faith and action. Kyle Zunker, holy crap! I haven't been in the room with someone this smart in a minute, bro. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. That's very kind.
Well, I'm reading that over there. I'm like, I should have brushed up on my vocabulary, did some vocal exercises, right, before today's show. But I actually have a really good friend who is a colleague and a friend. I shouldn't say colleague. We're professional acquaintances, but he's also a friend. And he's been featured in Best Lawyers for a handful of years. He's a little bit older than you. He's a little bit closer to my age. But I understand that publication and some of the things there, the vernacular of the law world. And so no easy thing. And remind me, magna cum laude, that's like, did I say it right? Was it Latin enough?
Yeah, I think so. As
Okay.
far as I know, you nailed it.
All right. So now that's so there's valedictorian, right, at the bottom of the geniuses. They're like the crap at the bottom of the barrel, the valedictorians, and magna cum laude, like that's the dudes running this. That's the valedictorians of the valedictorians. Is this right?
So if I remember correctly, there's like 3 tiers of cum laude, and I think magna is like the silver medal of the 3. I think
Okay.
I think there's one above it called summa cum laude, but
Oh.
it's been a couple years, to say the least, since I was in the academic kind of circle. So
Yeah.
I might be out of touch on what those rankings are.
Well, you're in good company with this show and our audience, because I don't know how many revolutionaries are running around magna summa cum laude, something else or another. But congrats. Not easy to do. Way to implement. It's one thing to have a gift and one thing to be born with some talent or some abilities mentally. It's another thing to implement those gifts and be a great steward of them and maximize what you have been given. And it seems like, man, you're barely 30, right? You're just over.
I'm 33 now.
Yeah.
Little over.
Yep. So it's not, I would say you're doing well, man. I'm glad to have you on the show and get your insights on this.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on. Looking forward to it.
Well, we work here in mindset and identity transformation for a lifestyle holistically aligned with core values. And that's when we first chatted about the idea of maybe doing something together, you had told me about these letters to your father, and I'm really excited for you to share some of those stories. But initially, in terms of, obviously, the elephant in the room, or the big topic is going from atheism to faith in God, right? Let alone a born-again relationship with Jesus or following the Lord as your king. So you can talk about that a little bit, intertwine it, whatever you want to do, but I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on the identity that you had back then, in the transformation of the identity specifically, and maybe how faith plays a part in that. And if you have to, however you tell your story, the stage is yours, my friend. Go ahead and riff on that as a beginning point.
Yeah, that sounds great. When we last spoke, that you're right, that's exactly the topic that we focused on, and we found a good rapport talking about, was this concept of um, your message of, look, you have to be true to your identity, right? And that can be faith oriented or not. But with regard to me and our conversation, that's certainly what we were talking about, and it's something that I'm really passionate about because I didn't always have that, and I grew up in a very fortunate environment. Hit the natural lottery when I was born to my parents, loving, supportive, amazing parents. Was never physically, verbally, or emotionally abused. Was never went without anything. So a really, really fortunate and blessed upbringing. But when it came to faith, my parents were like the CEO type church attendance, or maybe a little bit more. The Christmas, Easter, one other
Oh,
routine.
that's your CEO. I got
Right, right.
Christmas, Easter,
Um,
other. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. A
maybe a little
wedding
bit.
here and there.
Right, right, right. Maybe a little more than that, and certainly exposed me to enough that that I don't fault them in any means for. Uh, but uh, I was a Christian growing up as a kid through high school, but I really didn't take like a deep root into it. I had a pretty superficial kind of understanding, a check the box mentality of what faith meant to me, and that proved to be just completely insufficient when I left the house and went to college, right?
Mm.
Because I started being exposed to new ideas and experiences and things, and my really superficial understanding of faith and Christianity didn't hold up very well at all. And so that kind of fell over pretty quickly, and I ended up in a place where I didn't have any faith, certainly not a real Christian faith, and I wouldn't say really any faith in anything other than my kind of selfish mindset of what's going on right now and what's good for me in this moment, right? This week, this day. And so I sort of went through college like that, living with that sort of underlying philosophy of life. And nothing terrible came of it right then, and that's sort of the dangerous part. Is at first, that's great. Everything's better than it was before because you're, you know, going out, doing whatever you want to do, instant gratification, and there's seemingly no repercussions, right? And so that's awesome at first, but the problem is that the longer that drags on, all of the negative consequences sort of mount up, and they build up, and you don't realize what you've done until you're sort of already off in the dark, right? And at least that was my experience. And so by the time I graduated from college, I had had lived with such a selfish ethic of just making decisions for my own performance and my own sort of status gain, or doing whatever I wanted to do at that given time, that I ended up in a really dark place where I was plagued by anxiety, plagued by fear. I was never clinically depressed, but I definitely had some sort of depressed moments, and feelings that kind of stayed with me for a while, and then that just kind of continued on through my early 20s. And eventually got to a point after going through some really dark times of having this kind of litany of mystery health problems physically, in addition to really
Mm.
bad mental health, that I got to an absolute breaking point. And my wife and I, who's now my wife, we had just got engaged. I knew that she was religious, or that she had a faith life. And it's funny is I first came up with the idea of going to church without any intention whatsoever of it being meaningful, of it having any sort of a deep impact on me. Again, I was operating from this kind of performance based mindset of life of like, okay, well, if I do this, that's going to increase my credentials as like a good husband, right? Because like even though I don't want to go, I'm going to go to church with my wife, and so that's going to make me better on paper. You know, my resume as a husband is going to be better, especially if you're living, you know, in Texas, right? And so it's kind of like part of the cultural thing, and so it's like check the box, you know, build my resume up, and so we started going to church, and I was really surprised because I thought that it was going to be all kind of like prosperity promises and you know jargon, and that it was just going to be sort of like an emotional thing, and it wasn't going to make any sense. And you know, I was surprised to find that like the messages were simple and clear and biblically based and made a lot of sense to me. And it came to a point a couple months later where I was having again one of those rough nights where I would wake up in the middle of the night, my legs were buzzing, I couldn't sleep. You know, I would go walk on my apartment complex's treadmill for a couple of miles each morning at like 2 in the morning just to try to get sleep. Right, I was self-medicating with alcohol or doing this to try to like wear all this excess anxious energy out. And I finally just couldn't do it anymore. And so I remember I put my yoga mat out in the living room of our uh, little efficiency apartment, concrete floor loft style deal. And I got down on the yoga mat and I just like surrendered to God. And I hadn't prayed in so long that the only thing I could think to say is thy will be done, you know, and I just kept saying that. And, you know, I stopped worrying about everything that I was sort of afraid of in that moment and just kind of said, look, whatever, if anything that I'm scared of is your will, then your will be done. And just had this like overwhelming sensation that I didn't know how to describe. And it wasn't until months later that I first heard the words when um, at church we were talking about Philippians, and that you know those famous words popped up. You know, you experience the peace of God that surpasses all human understanding, and I was like, that's it. Like that's what happened to me on that night, and it's been you know it's been a that was back in 2016, so that's been 7 years ago now. You know, and it's been a journey since then, and that your whole life doesn't just miraculously have no problems after that, but it certainly was the biggest turning point in my life, and it's been a wild and fun journey since then. So I'll let you probe deeper on anything if you want to there.
Well, first of all, I love the fact, and this is my personality, the very my very favorite thing about, you know, the salvation of your soul and all that good stuff. Yeah, that's great. But what I love about it is that it happened on a yoga mat. And I love that very much because I've been around a lot of religious people in my life, and the more the religious they are, the more scared they are of anything that has, you know, like yoga. If it's a word that anybody in the old, you know, 20 years ago, the new age movement was
Yeah,
scaring everyone. And whatever that phrase means, I really don't care. But we know the connotation, right? And the more holes that you pull on the Bible belt and the deeper you get on that belt, the more scared they are of anything that doesn't start with an if, then, thee, or thou, or it is, right? And the
right.
fact I talked this to a pastor I knew, and I'm like, hey man, you know, do some yoga in the morning, helps with the PTSD, the anxiety, the resilience throughout my day. Do yoga in the morning, right? Do yoga. And dude, I mean, the guy might wanted to like submit me to the empire over there in Rome to get my Christian card revoked. Like, what is happening right now? I scared the crap out of him because I said yoga. He thought I was out here worshiping sun gods and doing all sorts of things. I'm like, man, it's just stretching and sweating, bro. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, that's no, that's interesting. That reminds me, I'll just on a quick side note, I just saw something on one of my friends' um, feeds on social media yesterday, and I don't know who they were quoting, so I apologize. This quote's not going to be have full proper credit, but it was something along the lines of, um, every you know, if you are so concerned about not hearing out what someone else thinks about God, then essentially you're scared to lose control over God, right? And of course, and that's not my line, something I saw on social yesterday, but it resonated with me, and I think it's related to what you're saying, because we don't control God, right? I mean, it's the other way around. And so I think, yeah, this concept of like, we're terrified to talk about yoga mats, or for instance, right? I think that that can be a problem if we're so unwilling to take the gospel and apply it to actual life, like actually things that are happening in 2023, right?
Yeah.
Because we're so nervous of losing control over what we want to control who God is, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, to the degree that you're offended in your faith or for your faith based on any outside external input, anything, your friend attending something, to the degree that you get offended is the direct correlation to the weakness of your faith. The
Yeah.
lack of foundation you have in your own security, in your own faith. And it took me a long time and taking a lot of what some people would call church hurt, getting the verbal abuses, the judgments, all these things, the condemnation from religious figures. It took a long time to realize that I wasn't the one on the wrong side of the aisle of that issue. I just kept thinking maybe it's my behavior, maybe I shouldn't talk to them that I have a beer, that I have beers at barbecues, and then I will Bible study the next morning, or like whatever the thing is. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter what the thing is, because it's always choice or behavioral based, or I don't know. We're getting off track, but yeah. Anyway, you see a lot of that, especially if somebody has a belief in something else. You get, yeah, you get the dogmas, man. Like the dogmas of the Pharisees, they come
Hmm.
raising up really hardcore. But anyway, all right, holiday yoga. I did a little bit yesterday. I was on the lime green mat yesterday in the backyard. All right, now. So you went from identity, you had made in a major identity shift. Essentially, would you say that you were more or less along, your identity was based in your performance along the route of climbing the ladder or the world's way? Just the standard sort of Western mindset.
Yeah, no, I mean, it exactly was, right. I had no faith based ethics or worldview, right? And so in the void of that, it was, like, we'll call it, similar to what you said, like the standard Western, or maybe the standard American approach, right? Which is like,
There you go. That's
okay,
better.
I want to work. I want to be like the guy that works the hardest. I want to be the guy that says the funniest things. I want to be the guy that dates the best looking women. I want to be the guy that makes the most money. And so it's just a pure mindset of, and also like, I want to be the happiest, right? I mean, we'll throw that in there, although I'm not really so sure that we actually want that, though, as much as we think we do, but that's sort of a different topic. But yeah, that's this kind of the standard American approach. And at least for me, that I just sort of found me, right? Like that, when I operated with no kind of underlying philosophy in anything bigger than myself, that's just where I'm going, right? I mean, that's where I went. And it just takes hold of you, and you run with it, right? Almost without intention.
Talk to me about this idea of the anxiety and the panic attacks, specifically those things you were dealing with. And I also want to affirm that, you mentioned clinical depression or being not clinically depressed. Sometimes I think that we can underplay our struggles as human beings. And now I'm talking to the revolutionaries in the audience, because, and take what from this, whatever you will, but in my own experience, it's given me this insight, this perspective. And that is, I don't think that we need one human being's university trained mind through their worldview to tell us whether or not we're depressed, which then would lead credence or value to the idea that, yes, I was diagnosed or I'm diagnosed clinically depressed. I think there's a lot of people, especially soldiers and vets, which is a community near and dear to my heart, 12 years Army, 1 combat deployment. And I mention that because I've struggled with PTSD, anxiety, paranoia, and depression. And yes, I have those diagnoses, but I don't believe that someone needs to have those diagnoses in order for these things to be valid in their life. And so if there's a general lack of energy, or this is reaching home to anyone, I kind of just felt led to say that. Don't downplay because you don't have a psychiatrist or a medical doctor's opinion about your mental state. I appreciate them. I respect them. I was a nurse for 10 years. I've worked with them. All the respect in the world, and cred to the work that they've done to earn the training that they have and the education. But it's one person through one worldview of their own with a background you have no idea in. They should never have that kind of power over someone's life to make them feel like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And then all of a sudden they're sitting in a parking lot and they take too many pills or they use a gun. And so I wanted to say that. I don't know exactly where that came from, but regardless, so there's that. With the identity piece, a big part of my standing is that I believe that most people are suffering frustration, lack of fulfillment, discontentment because for many different reasons, but the angle that I serve, the problem I solve and specialize with people is the fact that they are not living congruent with what they believe on the inside, who they really are. Even if they don't know that much about what they stand for, most of us have a handful of things that we know we don't stand for. Mm-hmm. And when we have anything in our external life, our jobs, our relationships, the way we handle our money, the way we treat the neighbor, anything that is incongruent, that's inconsistent with what we believe or stand for on the inside as a human being, our individuality, we're going to whatever degree that those things are off kilter, will be the extent of our lack of fulfillment, the height of our lack of fulfillment, or these other issues. When it comes to that, what are some perspectives that you have that you've gained after coming to faith and then digging into, your authentic identity that you were created with? And how did that change? How does that alter your life in the world? How does that change how you are as a husband, as a dad, as a professional, your dealings with others? And then as that relates to the rise in your happiness, we use that loosely, and the decrease in those negative vibrations, those negative frequency emotion things.
Yeah,
I know that's jam-packed loaded, but
well, it is, but it's jam-packed loaded with so many relevant and important questions and topics, right? And so
it's basically, how do you see life now that you're more in touch with who you were created to be than you used to, and how has that flourished? What fruit has come?
Right. Yeah, but to stick with the themes that you're talking about of identity and specific to the mental health struggles I went through,
Please.
I think one of the things for me was the scariest about having mental health struggles was it greatly shakes your identity, for me, right? Because if you don't have a real solid underlying concept of like your identity and your world view, which for me now is very firmly rooted in Christianity, but at the time it wasn't. And so then when you start to have, the first time you have a panic attack, and this is pretty ubiquitous, that almost everyone will tell you this, is like the first time you have a panic attack, you have no idea what's going on and you're terrified. Like you think you're physically going to die, you think you're having a heart attack or some sort of like very physical condition, which I guess in neuroscience would say you are having a physical condition, but it's not in that context, right? You think you're having like a heart attack or something and you're going to die, right? You can't breathe. And it's a very unsettling and alarming feeling, right?
I thought the world was going to end. I'm sorry. I thought the world was going to end and everyone around me had no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
That was one of the features of mine.
One of the first ones I had that I can still remember, I was in the back sitting in the last row of a minivan. We're on the highway. It was like we were going 70 miles an hour down the highway, and I wanted to punch out the window and jump out of the van at 70 miles an hour. And in my mind, that was the safer situation than just sitting there comfortably in the back of the van, because you lose all rational thought during a panic attack.
Yep.
At least I did, right? And that's similar to the conversations I've had with other people, right? And I mean, I'm not a neurologist or anything, but based on my experience and all the conversations I've had, it's a similar experience for everyone. And so to go back to identity, when that happens to you, I mean, it's very jarring to your concept of who you are and what your life is about, because you basically have lost all control over shaping your future, over shaping your day, right? I mean, if you live under constant threat of a panic attack, or you just going through waking up every day under a lot of anxiety and trying to get through your day, you're going to have a real hard time, right? I mean, you're going to have a hard time sitting at your desk for 8 hours, which there was a point in my life when that was the case for me. Like I couldn't, it was a struggle just to get through the things I needed to get through, right? I couldn't go, I had to live under the constant fear of, will I be able to go through the airport, or will I have a panic attack for whatever reason, right? And whenever panic and anxiety started to get disassociated with any trigger that I could identify, that's when it started to get really scary and alarming for me, right? Because so long as they're connected to a trigger, you think, okay, look, like this isn't ideal, but I can just kind of avoid those types of situations, or I can do this or whatever. But once it gets seemingly random, then for me, that was the point where I would, it really dominated my life. And that's the point when your identity becomes really hard to figure out or connect with, or it becomes lost to you. And if you think that if your identity is tied up in, oh, I'm an A student, or I'm a really fun guy, or I'm great, I'm a great closer for my baseball team, or whatever it is, and then that stuff starts to get eroded away from you because of whatever crisis you're going through in life, right? Then I mean, where does that leave you, right? And where it left me, without faith, is I got to a point where I didn't know who I was, right? And the transformation from that of, I'm suffering from all of these things, these mental health problems, that are now compounding into physical health problems, where I'm going and, my blood work is showing that my different measurable things like hormones are off the medical charts, right? But no one can tell me why. And so now it's feeding into, now I have this mysterious condition or disease or whatever that no one can figure out. And that's one of the worst things that someone who's already anxious and afraid and doesn't have a good foundation on life can hear, because that's just going to spiral further, right? So to go from that and sort of the atheistic worldview, where there's really no hope unless things are happening to be going very well for me, otherwise it's just all terrible, right? And so then to transfer over to, okay, under the Christian worldview, which is the identity that I've grown into, I'm part of something bigger, right? And at the end of the day, there's infallible hope, right? And I have an identity as a created being, and I have an opportunity and a role in God's will. And that transformation from an identity standpoint was, I mean, it's 180 for me. And it has been the single biggest change in my life. And I mean, to say that it helped with mental health is almost not even the right word. I mean, it changes the perspective of everything in life on its head. And so, yeah, I still struggle with anxiety. If I'm not careful, if I'm not guarded against it, it will still flare up, right? But now everything is okay. I understand better. Hey, you know what? I haven't been sleeping that much because I've been working a lot, or I let my workout schedules get off track, or I kind of got this going on in my life that I know I need to just go, nip it in the bud and kind of control it. So I'm able to better understand where some of this stuff's coming from. But even beyond that, even if anxiety just hits me, right? I have so much better response because my identity is rooted in my faith now.
What's the premise of your book, Amazing Courage?
The premise of the book is that we each have a choice with regard to faith. So we each can choose faith. It's not something that's reserved for only those who are certain. It's open to all of us, and it's an invitation. And that by choosing faith, we're able to embrace God's truths over fear's lies. That's, if you want to wrap it up in a little nutshell, that's it. And the book
Mm.
tells this. It's a narrative nonfiction book, so it's not like a textbook. I don't claim to be the expert on all things, uh, faith and fear, right? But I have lived through um, some pretty painful experiences and come out on the other side um, in a really healthy and joyful state. And so my goal is to share those experiences and what I've learned. And um, you know, someone who has sort of gone through all of the things and done them all wrong, right? I mean, they may have a fool's wisdom, but nevertheless, they've learned something. And I think that's where I am, where I learned from experience, the wrong way a bunch. But nevertheless, I eventually learned. So um, that's something that I want to share in the book.
Yeah, well, God's truth over fear's lies. That's beautiful because you are the expert of your path.
Right.
And when we're all experts of our own path, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's a little bit of a duh. But if you think about that, that's the reason that all of us can get value from all of us.
Right.
One thing that I say when I do any kind of event is I say all of us are less without all of us.
Yeah. That's profound. I like that.
Wish it was mine. Just came through my brain. I don't take much credit for things that come through unless they're half cocked stupid. So then I know it was just me. But when it has that level of wisdom and simplicity, I know it's not from me. I got the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit inside, man. I get taught from the teacher of teachers. And so, but that also should help anybody who deals with what we've called imposter syndrome over the years in this world, right?
Right.
Especially with the social media in the last 10 years, imposter syndrome. Well, who am I? Like I tell my daughter, she's like, she's starting senior year, and I'm trying to encourage her, go get personal training clients. She's been a high level travel volleyball player for years. She knows championship competition. She knows how to grind. She knows how to bleed and throw her body into the wood floor and get burnt up. And like, she's tough. And I'm like, go do that. She's like, I don't even have my certification yet. And I go,
Hmm.
from who? Who
Right.
says you're not qualified to go teach somebody else who doesn't know what you know how to do it? How to get going in their life? Amy Porterfield is a brilliant marketer, and I like her business ethics. And she says to be an expert means all you need is to have 10% more knowledge or expertise than the people you're teaching.
Right.
I think it's just a simple way of saying what I was just saying too. It's a simple way of saying that. If you know more, and plus you with your path, it's a perspective nobody else can glean. So there's that little speech. Now, I'd like to get into these letters to your dad in terms of how they played a part in maybe your healing, your relationship, because they've had to bless you inside your own spirit and your own emotions. And I imagine you had to get a little closer to who you really are in that archaeological project of figuring out really our purpose. And how's that play for you?
Yeah. Uh, I'm glad you asked that right now, because one of the things I was going to bring up when you mentioned imposter syndrome was that writing that first letter to my dad, and then eventually turning those letters into a book. Because give it a high level kind of timeline just for context here. So 2016, I'm 26 years old. I get on the yoga mat and tell God, look, thy will be done for me. Like I have tried and failed so hard to do this on my own, right? Okay, my faith, I'm on the faith journey, and I'm loving where it's taking me and everything. But come 2019, 3 years later. And I had been thinking, like, hey, I think I want to write a book about this. Like, I want to help other people who who are where I was, right, prior to my conversion, prior to 2016, because there was points where I thought I was going to die. There was points where I thought life was hopeless. I mean, looking back, it seems ludicrous, right, from now, like, this perspective, but the reality of that situation is that's where I was, right? And I thought that my life was hopeless, even though from an outside perspective everything looked, like, well, from a check the box standpoint, but I was in, like, a secret lonely nightmare. And I know that there are other people who have that, right? And those are the people I'm trying to reach now. But, you know, 2017 passed, 2018 passed, 2019 is going past, and I kept false starting with writing this book because I kept thinking I'm not the right person to do this. Like, I'm not a good enough person to write about faith. I'm not a good enough writer to write something original and insightful and whatever, all these lists of reasons. I get the phone call from my dad that he has been diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and the next day I start writing the letters. And all of the worries and fears that I had were immediately gone because I wasn't focused on worrying about myself and my own status and standing and shortfalls and whether I would be judged well or not. Instead, my shift entirely focused on my dad and helping him. And that, like, was just completely liberating. And what I realized in that moment is, the Bible talks a lot about fearing God, like he feared God, she feared God. And I always thought, what is that? That's kind of a weird thing. What does that mean? But I learned in that moment that fearing God means trusting God so much that going against his will and missing your opportunity in his will is the only thing to be afraid of. So fear of everything else is paralyzing, it's intimidating. Fearing God is liberating. And when that happened, it was like a light switch for me. I wrote all of those letters to my dad, and it was really a process. It was over about a 3 month period. I think there's 18 letters. And I mean, I really got to solidify a lot of what I had learned about faith, and in particular, my take on the power for faith in God to help us get through tough times, right? To face tough times, right? Even if we don't ultimately end up getting through them on this side of eternity, right? To navigate them and to face those challenges. And so the letters were, I mean, I wrote them to encourage my father, to help him, choose faith and to share the good news of the gospel with him. But yeah, to your point, I think it was just as beneficial to me in solidifying, everything that I had come to believe in and developed from a thought process and a worldview, to just kind of put that all in writing. They were indescribably powerful for my life, right? And that's why, afterwards I decided to turn those letters into a book, and so that my book that's coming out next year, it has the 18 letters in it. They're sort of the backbone of the book. They're right there. They're not revised. They're not edited. They're nothing. They're just raw letters. They're the real deal. They were written by hand. They went with a little postage stamp in a white envelope from San Antonio, Texas to Atlanta, Georgia. Like, they're genuine. And I decided, I'm not going to revise them. I'm not going to clean them up. I want to show people this is what it actually looked like for me, right? No makeup or polish or Photoshop or whatever. And then I partnered each letter with a life lesson, a memoir, a story, from my life, where I can see now how God was at work, the lessons of faith to be learned from that moment, even if I couldn't see it at the time, right? And so I've each little memoir ties to one of the points in the letter, and so it's like a reflection on each one.
That's beautiful, man. I'm excited to read this book when it comes out. I really am. because I love that stuff. I like deep, I like heavy. It's not normal.
Yeah. I'm sort of in the same boat as you, so
But
we're kindred spirits there.
what would you say is is there a number one lesson you've learned through allowing yourself to go through the emotional risk required to engage your dad apart from your own feelings through his hard time? Many people will be so sad. And this is where the self-centeredness comes in. And I don't mean to be demeaning whatsoever or insulting to anyone hearing this when I say self-centered. When we hear something tragic has happened to someone we really love or care about, most of the time we feel the worst for ourselves. It's just normal. Our dog
Hmm.
dies. We're in
Yep.
depression for days. That's
Hmm.
because of how we're feeling for ourselves. I'm not knocking it. It's natural. But in that, what would you like? I don't even want to lead the answer too much, but we're getting close to wrapping up this time, because these are big things, and I don't. I could talk to you for another 3 hours about this, but other people are going to be like spiritually exhausted just listening to the clips. So, what biggest lesson you've learned about walking in your own identity through that process, the vulnerability of the emotional risk you took.
Yeah, the single biggest lesson I think is that fear is really the enemy. If you lack the faith oriented identity, then I think that everything that's happening in your life, if you really peel back the layers, you'll see that you have a consistent enemy there, and it's fear. And why I say that is fear is a fraud who robs us of today with threats about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Meaning, whatever you're scared of, if it's financial, might not even be close to happening to
Hey,
you.
Kyle.
Yep.
Uh, you said fear, whatever it is that you're afraid of, and then the audio cut. If you just
Can you hear me?
repeat,
Can you
if
hear
you
me
just start,
okay?
yep, just start
Yeah,
with that
okay.
again.
So let me just back up. So uh, I don't know where it cut off. I'll just start over.
Fear, whatever you're afraid of.
Yeah, whatever you're afraid of. So whatever you're afraid of, if it's financial ruin, if it's disease, if it's that your spouse will leave you, those things might not be happening to you now. They might not even be likely. They might never happen to you. But if you're afraid of them, then they are happening to you right now because
Mm.
you're living in that you're experiencing that negative consequence right now through fear. And what
So
Christianity
good.
promises, the identity that it offers, is a trust in God that in the end, there is nothing to fear. Everything will be redeemed, everything will be restored. God has plans for you that are good and to prosper, not for disaster. And that identity has allowed me to let go of all of those fears of everything else and stop experiencing and stop living in all of that tragedy that hasn't even occurred each day.
It's beautiful. One of the things that I learned some time ago after hearing a couple speakers say a couple different things, it kind of melded in my mind as this, and that's when we're living like that, we're perverting our own imagination. Instead of using this beautiful imagination we've been given in our authentic identity because we're made in the image of the creator, which means we are creators. So you're like you said, you're creating the negative impact now. And you're doing it by misusing your imagination
Yeah.
instead of the faith walk, right? Like living in that faith, which can be tricky because you're like, oh, you want me to fear God, but you say fear is the enemy. That's why we need a different word than fear. I look up these little words in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
the Greek and the Hebrews and the original, and what was fear. And these are not the words that we use. We assign fear to it. There should be a fear of an almighty being that can turn us into dust with a thought. But that's not his desire to do that. His desire is love and unity. That's God's desire for us. But anyway, I don't want to get into semantics too much, but there is a bit of a difference there. And I don't know why I said that. But yeah, misusing the imagination. And you're talking about how you're bringing those negative effects in now. 100% the truth. That's how we make ourselves sick and give ourselves ulcers. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
we gonna say
that's
something?
that. No, that absolutely. I mean, that's essentially what anxiety is, right? Is taking in and digesting all of this concerns about, the future, which I'm not telling people don't think ahead, don't, analyze potential outcomes of things in your life and make plans accordingly. I'm a real big goal oriented person, so I do that all the time. But the problem is when you let the fear creep in and now you start experiencing the pain that you think those potential tragedies could bring, you've now, in a large part, made that a reality for yourself, right? I mean, because you're now experiencing the pain of something that may never happen to you, right? And I did that as much as anyone, right? And so that was one of the probably the single biggest lesson that I learned about faith and fear is when your identity is rooted in God's promises, then that's what allowed me to stop that process, right? To stop internalizing and just ruminating over all of these potential things that could happen.
Yeah. And there's something that I've been going back and forth about mentioning or not, and whether I should or not. I'm gonna do it. It's a little risky. And I only mean risky because I don't spend any time on this show or this podcast clarifying something if I don't believe it's critical to do it. I'll let people say things even or get their message out that even if I disagree in a way, but if it's not like critical, kind of just let it rock. And I don't disagree with you. I want to say this because of the listener who might be having some of these thoughts. And one of the main purposes of my life is to help people who have been shunned by a religious environment understand who their father is and what Jesus is really all about. Those are two different, independently distinct things. The religious structure, and we can say even the building on Sunday, and the creator of the universe. They're different. They're not, I don't want to say they're not related, but look, I've done a lot of college in this area. I've done a lot of reading on my own of the history of the church, and we'll see if these even makes the publication. But I'm just bringing this out because I heard it, and the way my past goes with these negative experiences that I've had around some of these people, and I said Pharisees earlier, right? Like modern day Pharisees, rule mongers, step out of line and we're going to smack you in the name of the Lord and all these things. And so I'm only bringing it up for that reason. And there's my 2-minute disclaimer because I'm not correcting you. I'm helping the person's perspective.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple times the structure, Christianity, that word. I'm down. We're homies. You know what I mean? Like, but then also, you're also very clear about the relationship with God and what the Lord does in your life, what he wants for you. I want to lean on that because I think in this country, in America, and in other places too, but I've seen it here across the country. The experience with Christianity isn't always that bright.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met anyone who got a chance to meet Jesus, spiritually speaking, done by someone well, someone like you with an open heart, where you spend time talking to somebody right where they are. You're not concerned about their behavior. You are for their sake, but you're not there to tell them what they're doing wrong and how they can do something right. That's not what we were told to do when Jesus left Earth. That's not what he said. He said, go make followers.
Right.
So when you don't follow anybody that you don't believe loves you or cares about you, and when people show up for the vast majority on Sunday mornings or Saturday nights, we won't even get into Wednesday nights because I'm not trying to offend people on purpose. They're religious people. But I want to help that person who has these experiences. Like, they're not antagonistic necessarily toward God or this relationship, but all they know of him is the stuff they've experienced on the negative side. And I want to say clearly, that Jesus is different than Christianity. Christianity is not Jesus. Now, did he found it? Maybe. If you want to say they figure who it's based on. But and again, I don't want to get too deep in that. I just wanted to draw a clear line and let people know that whatever we don't know what the perspective is, right? Maybe someone went once or twice, man, with a family member, and that's what it stands for now.
Hmm.
Whatever this experience was, like, oh, if you believe in that, you're going to hell. They told me that when I was 13. I asked a simple question about abortion. I asked a question in my catechism class.
Hmm.
I asked a question. They said, if you believe that, you're going to hell. I'm like, what?
Right.
I'm trying to understand over here, dude. I didn't say I don't believe in anything. I'm 13. So
No.
I wanted to put that out there because I believe many, many, many people are missing out on this absolutely raucous relationship with their maker because of some of the things that humans have done to them in the name of Christianity. We won't even get into the Crusades and the history of the church. I won't do that because there's no defense for it,
Hmm.
right? There's no defense. Anyway, I hope that didn't
No,
come out too hard either. I don't want
no,
to be that way, but I didn't want it to clear for them.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I mean I have my own whole story uh of this, and some of it's in the book about this point, right? And you know, we're all flawed people, and that includes people who go under you know, the umbrella of Christians. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of Christians as a whole do ourselves a disfavor by not clarifying this more, right? The relational aspect um, of what it means to know God, right? To know Jesus, and if you get too caught up in the dogmatic religion or arguing or that type of stuff, yeah, you're doing the entire faith a disservice. So
Yeah.
I actually appreciate your comment there. And yeah, you know, when it's sort of tough when you're trying to describe something in shorthand, what exactly terms to use, right? Because you got to walk the line between like it's just all that matters is religion and just do these 10 things versus like, oh, if you're just spiritual in whatever that means, it's like, no, like I this is what I'm saying in the middle. But no, so I appreciate you you know, helping us clarify that, because I do think that's an important distinction. And I certainly don't want anyone who's listening to this to think, okay, then what I need to do is just go find the nearest church, and whatever the human being at the front of the room says, then that's what I have to just decide my life on. Um, I do think going to church and being involved in communities is important, but you got to have your antennas up and listen, and for your own mind and for God to make sure you're at the right spot.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. Maybe we'll do something on this someday because I've done a lot of work in that area, and I just I'm not doing anything with that professionally, but I feel like I'm called to do something different. I know I'm called to do something a little bit different, but that's part of it. Okay, to wrap up, what is something, a thought, a practical something that someone can do right now on the fly in their life to nudge closer? Since your book's not available yet, what's something they can do now if they're attracted to this idea, like, you know what, I want to get a little bit more emotionally secure and stable, and I want to choose faith over fear. I want to trust. It's just so damn hard. Like, it's hard. How do I do that when this is happening? I got diagnosed with stage something, whatever. And my wife saw an acquaintance recently who was, man. Anyway, I don't even want to get into that. It's a tragic story. It seems tragic. It seems, but who knows? Every life has a massive purpose. And so anyway, what is something somebody can do right now to begin doing that walk?
Yeah, so I've got, in conjunction with my book, there's going to be some supporting materials that people can dive into, that I'm tentatively calling the 5 C's to conquer fear, right? And so, like I said, my book is a narrative nonfiction. It's a story type framework, right? I've lifted kind of what I think are the 5 like practical steps you can take. So taking that content and like repackaged it over here some people learn best from stories. Some people like, to have the bullet point, do these 5 things. And so what I'll share now is just the first one from those 5, and that's call out fear. And this relates back to what I was saying earlier, which is the in my mind, the first step, and this is the process I went through, is you have to start to recognize that fear is the enemy that you're up against in these situations. So we get fixated on the thing itself, whatever it is, the the possibility of a diagnosis, or if we have a diagnosis, like what the stats are and what stage you're in and so forth, or if you hear news about the economy, you think that that's the enemy, right? This downturn in the economy. Right now, I'm in New Orleans as we sit here today. There's salt water coming up the Mississippi River. In late October, it's going to infiltrate the city's water, and there's not going to be any fresh water, is what they're saying. Okay, so that's to put it in context. That's right now what everyone's afraid of, right, and worrying over. But the point is that way that that miserable feeling that you have, what you call like this frustration, this lack of content, it's not tied directly in calls to those things, right? Those are just like the little points. What I would encourage everyone is the first step is call out fear. Recognize that what's actually stealing the joy from your life and making you miserable is the fear of that thing, not necessarily that thing itself. And that's the first step if someone wants to start on, I'm in this miserable dark place. How do I get out of it? That's what I recommend to everyone is the first step.
Dude, that I love that because that's in line with my stuff's the wording in these things is different, but I say the first step you got to do is we have to help people increase their awareness in order to get congruent with their identity, right? To walk holistically aligned. You have to raise the awareness. That's the first step in anything. And I love that because that's what you're doing. You're training yourself to call out fear, which over time of doing that, it'll become a natural response that you're fully aware that when something comes along, nope, that's fear. I don't have to go there. This could be real, but I don't have to be scared. I don't have to live scared, right? And I love that. It's like we got these little pool floats. And as a kid, I had blow up, the punching bag that you blow up and it kind of sat there with the sand in the bottom, little air inflatable punching bags. But even the pool floats, everything, you blow these things up with air, the rafts or whatever. And calling out fear, it's all full, and that's fear, and you're pulling the plug on that little rubber stopper, and you open it, the valve, and it slowly, you can force it, you can push it, get rid of it faster. There's other things you can do, but I love that because you calling out fear reminds me, just pull the plug and watch that inflatable monster just shrivel, because it literally only is real by the power we give it.
Yes.
That's it. It literally is that.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
It's nothing except for a shadow of something else. Like fear is nothing in itself. It's only the shadow that we give to other things that we're looking out, potential things, right? And let me just say one more thing to put, because I like when I'm listening to someone, if they give some context and on something, and like an example, because sometimes these abstract concepts are a little difficult. And one of the ways that I have learned and have practiced this calling out fear, I do a lot of ultra distance endurance athletics. Don't get me wrong, I'm not sponsored or competing for first place or anything. I'm up against the cutoff times in the back of the pack, but nonetheless, I love doing these events. I find a lot of meaning in them, and I'm out there grinding away on them. And something I've learned, and a couple of times when I've been, in a real dark place, in the pain cave, so to speak, you might be at mile 60 of a 100-mile race, and a lot of people start to quit at that point, right? And because the pain's pretty intense. But I'm a firm believer that people don't quit races because of pain. That's what they think. They think that the pain gets too much for them to continue, so they quit. People quit races because of fear. Pain only comes to you in the present moment. you only experience the pain of each step as you take that step in a long race. But fear makes you experience the pain of the next 40 miles in each step, because you project out and you take all of that pain, all of this worry about, oh, I have to do this for another 40 miles, and you start to feel it in every step. And you think to yourself, well, I can't handle this much for, this long.
Huh.
But that's a lie. I mean, the problem is you don't have to experience 40 miles of pain in each step. It just comes to you step by step, and you always have enough courage to take one more step, right? And that is what I'm talking about calling out fear. Is whatever it is you're going through, if it seems overwhelming, and it seems like you can't go on, you can, right? If you recognize, okay, that's fear, get that out of the way. What do I have to do to take the next step? Is it going to hurt? Yeah, but I can do that, and I can do the next one, and I can do the next one. And don't let fear bring in all of the future possible pain into you in that moment.
That's deep, man. That's awesome. That's probably something you can only get when you're at mile 60 and 70 and 80, huh? You can only unlock that code at that point.
Yeah, and I think so in the running context. But what I love about these ultra endurance events is they're one vehicle through which you can learn these life lessons, because that's the same with, like, you're going through, maybe you're going to get a divorce with your spouse, or your kid is is a teenager, and they're having this kind of like teenage rebellious streak, and you as a parent are at your wits. I mean, you can translate it to any of these things where it's like it seems insurmountable, it seems hopeless, it seems like the easiest thing to do is just to quit, right? But if you it's that same process, that same mindset of, okay, that's fear. I don't have to currently deal with all of the pain that may or may not come over the next 40 miles, the next 3 months, the next, move, whatever it is. I just have to take this step by step and handle what's going on right now.
Yeah, because that makes sense to me. Because you can be willing, and especially athletes at that level, you're willing to absorb the pain. But the fear is extending, and they're different. I'm willing to absorb the pain, but this concept of fear and what it's doing to me right now, what I'm letting it do to me, that's where you're saying that's constant, that stays, and it's going to be this long and all this work. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Well, I mean,
It's worse.
look at it. Yeah. I mean, look at it this way: is if you're running 100 miles, the most, I mean, as a general rule, the most painful steps, right, are going to be the last 100 that you take to get to the finish line, right? And that's when your body's deteriorated the most. You're the most inflamed. You've been up the longest without sleep the most at that point. You're whatever. Everything. The blisters are worst. Those last 100 steps are objectively the most painful of the race. But almost no one quits if you have only 100 steps left. You quit when you've only done 60 out of 40 miles, even though the pain in those steps is objectively less, because you allow fear that you still have 40 miles left to come get you in that moment, right? You don't fear when you have 99 steps left. You just go do the 99 steps.
Yeah, there's no fear.
Right.
There's just the pain.
Right.
And if you're willing, wow, that's awesome. Where can people track you? Where do you want to be followed? Where do you like to hang out socially?
So I'm on Instagram as my primary application, Kyle A. Zunker. That's my middle initial. I'm under the same handle or name on Facebook, which gets kind of my copied Instagram content at the moment. So it's on there also. And then I will have my website up hopefully by the time this gets published. But if not, then shortly after that, which would just
When do you want it published? When's the website?
I'm hoping to get it up in the next couple of weeks. So
Oh, shoot.
by
All right, I don't have time for that. It's
no
going to be
worries.
after the website.
Okay. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So,
I was like,
yeah.
after the first of the year, I got a handful in the queue.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. I'll
Yeah.
be really getting after the website will certainly be up by the first of the year. That's kylezunker.com. And the I'll have a blog going that I'm going to kick off after the turn of the year as a ramp up for the book, so people can go sign up to follow along on that, get a little newsletter each time a new article comes out, and it's going to be on the topic of faith. Also, I'm thinking on the blog I might go a little bit deeper on the atheism to Christianity faith aspect,
It's
and kind
huge,
of
man.
put out some content for people who are kind of on that line or just curious about it, on a little bit of the more sort of intellectual standpoint, not so much like, you know, evidence that demands a verdict or these things where you're going to looking at archaeological records or stuff. But what I think I'm most suited to offer people is like, look, you know, I do this for a living as a lawyer. Let's look at what really the question is. Let's kind of like get some context on it and see what question are we really asking, and like where are the burdens of like proof on, and just make sure that we're coming to the question clear-headed and with a productive approach, right? And I think that's um, the content that's going to be coming out on the blog after the first of the year. People can kind of follow along with me on that and get ready for the book release in May or June of next year.
Do you write to one person? Have you heard of
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I have. You know, and I've heard of that, and I know people who are big proponents of that say like, oh, I was writing to my ninth grade English teacher or to my brother or you know or to whoever. Um, I would, you know, I would say yes. I write with the intention of connecting with like one person, but it's not, I don't have that specific of, I don't picture a certain real person in my head
Yeah.
when I'm writing.
You
Um,
know, it's something to consider because it's so powerful to do and it's become more second nature to me than it ever has been. I don't think I'm 100% unconsciously doing it yet, but I do it and I do it consciously all the time. And my writing and the responses that came from, especially through my email list, have like it's increased. It's changed. I had a guy who knows me email me back off of one of my emails and he goes, "Hey man, this was awesome." He goes, "I literally was halfway through it before I realized you weren't exactly writing it to me as a one-off email to me."
mm,
He was halfway through the email before he realized it was from my list. But
yeah.
it's stuff that I'm serving one person with, and I've gotten the audience dialed in to a point where I know I'm over 90% effective, and that's probably low given the lack of unsubscribes that I have. I don't get many unsubscribes, and that's
Hmm.
because it's dialing into that, and that's helped because I've grown a lot. And yeah, you're gonna grow in your skill and how you're gonna express things, but that's our style is generally who we are.
Hmm.
But the writing to one person versus writing random hatchet thoughts, it's a game changer, and I would encourage you to come up with that person. And you know, if nothing else, you know, Rory says we're best suited to serve the person we once were, right? You know
Yep.
that one,
Yep.
dude. You, because of especially with your degrees and in your academic excellence and some of these worldly street creds you can put on a resume that most people will never have. You know, I'm not telling you to write to a lawyer, but you could easily write to a lawyer.
Hmm.
And you know, maybe the 24, 25-year-old version of that lawyer, and then the message can reach, you know, that lawyer that's 25 to 35 in those prime growing years when a lot of our not just lawyers, a lot of our arrogance is getting built about our results and how proud we are of ourselves, but we're the ones who know who the man is or the woman is when we look in the mirror at the end of the day. We know if that person is truly happy or is truly making it happen, or we're just really good at performing out there in the circus of the world.
Right.
Because a lot of us can be that too. And anyway, is that a dog?
Yeah, not mine though.
Oh,
Outside. Yeah.
oh, wow, good earbuds.
Mine is has been very good for this recording, so
Awesome.
I'm very appreciative of her. Take her on a walk afterwards as a reward. So
Right on. Well, I'm going to let you do that. I appreciate this. What I'd like you to do, if you're get down for it, when you get closer, like within a month of maybe when you have a hard date of publication,
hmm
throw me a text or an email and let me know that that's coming, and let's bring you on to do a quick 20 to 30 minutes edited. We can do a quick time together for you to promote the book and maybe share 2 to 3 of the powerful C's without giving the whole book, but being generous with the offering, because that creates so much goodwill when people know you're giving stuff away. And so anyway, that's I
Oh
want
no,
to be able to
yeah.
help you promote that.
Oh, I'd love to come back on. Today's been great, and I'd be happy to share some real meaningful content and not just, teasers or anything. No,
Well, no,
let's
even
let's
even
let's
the
help
teasers,
people. Yeah.
yeah, even the teasers are fine as long as the teasers, yeah, give some satiation, right? If it
Right. Right.
satisfies, like here's this C, call out fear. Here's a practical exercise, or here's if you know you have a breakthrough mindset that you can offer for 2 or 3 of those C's. I don't want you to give them all away, but if we did them all, we'd have to do 5 different shows because nobody would
Right.
listen to all 5 shows to get all 5 C's, but they would listen to one episode to avoid buying the book.
Right.
So that's human nature. But yeah, maybe like one of your sort of unique thought leading insights that can go along with it, or a touching story of of your dad, because those things are they're so universal.
Yeah.
you
No,
know
I'd love to. That sounds
awesome.
sounds fantastic.
All right, we'll do it then. We'll connect, maybe even maybe a text or something before the holidays, maybe get in touch after or something, but we'll definitely be in touch, bud. And I appreciate your time and your generosity.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been
Yeah,
been great.
awesome. All right, Kyle, thanks, man. We'll see you next time. Revolutionaries,
Thanks.
we're out.